Hello. Well, it's summertime, and as they say, the living is easy. Or is it? If you're a victim of domestic violence, that may not be the case. You only have to open the newspaper, turn on the radio or your local TV station, and you'll hear about a domestic violence homicide. And we in Manatee County, like other places in the United States, have the same problems they do. We've had any number of domestic violence homicides. Today, I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of a domestic violence update, a summer edition, if you will, so that we can talk about what's happening here in our community. With me today, I have the pleasure of Major Connie Shingeldecker from the Manatee County Sheriff's Office, a woman I've worked with for many years, who is a champion for victims and survivors of domestic violence. Connie, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Laurel.
And Bree Cialucci, who I like to think is the future of services for domestic violence survivors. She's our prevention advocate at Hope Family Services and works with young women to help stem the tide of violence that they're experiencing in their lives. Bree, what can I say? Thank you for being here. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Connie and I were talking earlier about, Major Shingeldecker and I were talking earlier about she's been doing this work for a very long time. I'd like to put a qualifier in that she must have been 5 years old when she started, because she's been doing this work for 35 years. And so I would imagine in 35 years you've seen lots of changes to not only what's happening to victims of domestic violence, but also the response law enforcement has had in addressing this issue. Can you tell us a little bit about that today?
Oh, wow. I can go back to the day when I was a patrol officer and just finding my way through dealing with issues of domestic violence. And many of us as law enforcement officers would go out wearing two hats, a counselor's hat and a law enforcement hat, and really did not understand the dynamics behind the situation, and felt that we could mediate and we could help these folks, and that maybe just having someone go spend the night somewhere else was going to be a resolution. And so the complete change from that to a pro-arrest policy has been huge, and I think that it has done a lot to save lives.
I think you're right. I mean, we hear far more positive stories from people call and they say, oh, law enforcement was at my house, and they let the perpetrator, the batter, or whatever, my boyfriend, my husband, know right up front that this is not going, they're not coming back tonight, no walk around the block. And for older survivors, they tell us it's different today. What kinds of changes have you had to institute within the department to get, because changing people's behavior is not as quickly as changing a rule?
Well, first and foremost, it's in the statute. They've actually put things into the statute that require law enforcement to do specific things. For example, if we don't make an arrest, we have to explain why. If we arrest both parties, that is frowned upon. We have to explain why we would be arresting both parties. So we need to be more thorough in our investigations, and certainly understand that people have the right to defend themselves, and so we need to be looking at who is the primary aggressor. So the types of training that we're doing now with these officers is trying to get them to understand how to investigate more thoroughly, how to investigate perhaps and not have a willing victim come and testify in court. So if we can get enough evidence and enough information that's usable in court, then we can move forward without the victim, because many of them do not cooperate, and that's part of the dynamic with this type of crime as well.
Well, and just for Bree, your information and anyone who's interested, I had the pleasure of attending one of your trainings with the deputies, and I think you rotated every single deputy through the training, which how you did that is beyond my comprehension, because there's a lot of folks on the road. And I thought it was eye-opening, not only what they were being taught about domestic violence, which is this is stuff we know in the business, but their reaction to it and how receptive. And boy, that's a new day in our world, because it used to be considered a family matter.
Well, one of the trainings that you attended was where we were looking at the lethality. We now do a lethality assessment on top of teaching the officer to look at primary aggressor and what would evidence look like in a primary aggressor case, trying to make that determination when both persons may have injuries. So we talk about the height and weight difference between the victims, and we had a small snippet of an actual videoed incident of domestic violence, and we presented that, and we talked about it, and it was certainly someone that was much larger male battering a much smaller female, and just looking at the dynamics of that circumstance, and getting them to talk about it and discuss it and say, if you were out in the field and you had this kind of information, you know, what do you see right off the bat with it? But and then the lethality assessment piece is trying to determine with a victim, are they potentially the next person that could be a homicide, domestic related homicide victim? And then providing additional services to those individuals, making sure that we connect them with hope right away.
And we appreciate that. Although we could have a fewer people, it'd be okay too. Bree, you're in the schools. You're dealing with primarily young women. And just for anybody that's concerned about my gender bias, it is still, we know men are battered. I mean, absolutely, we help men who come to Hope who are battered. The numbers, though, are not really equivalent. About 5% of our caseload are men, and many of them are gay men battered by their partner, not straight men. So while straight men may be out there being battered, they're not coming to us for help. So, but I do know, I mean, I am gender biased when I talk, because it's, you know, after all these years, that's really what we see mostly as women. So Bree, you're in the schools and you're talking with young women. Tell us a little bit about what you do. What are you doing to fix this problem? Because it's in your hands now.
Yeah, we're doing a large amount of work with specifically 7th grade through 12th grade, talking to the students, and I talk to boys and girls because I think it's important for the students to be cognizant of the way that they're behaving as well as how they're being treated. So we talk about things like warning signs to look out for in a relationship, and we focus not only on the negative, but we also focus on what does a healthy relationship look like? What should a healthy relationship consist of? Do you have equal power in your relationship? Is one person making all the decisions? That kind of thing. We talk about jealousy. You know, is jealousy natural? Everybody is jealous sometimes. True. You know, I raise my hand just like everyone else. However, are you using your jealousy to control or manipulate your partner? That's where it borders into abuse. So things that a teenager might find cute or special. He doesn't want me to talk to any other boys because he loves me so much. You know, we try to bring those things to light as, you know, no, that's more of an insecurity of your partner or a fear that he may have, more so than he cares about you so much. So we talk about a lot of different things, and we define what dating abuse is, the different types of abuse, because there's still the myth that if you're not being hit, you're not being abused. And so we try to dispel some of those myths, as well as just bringing to light what are the major red flags to look out for in a relationship.
Do you find that young women have a hard time talking about it, or are they more free-flowing with information than, you know, maybe previously?
Yeah, they tell me more than I want to know most times. They seem to be very open to talking about it. Many of them are in relationships, even as young as 5th graders are telling me that they have boyfriends and girlfriends and they're in what they consider to be relationships. So I think the dating violence versus domestic violence is not that much different. It may be different in terms of what the actual dating is to that couple, but the same type of things are happening with teenagers that are happening in adult relationships that are unhealthy.
Same dynamics, same power control tactics.
And I think they get it, and they're open to talking about it.
Well, and one of the things that I think is certainly topical, there was a homicide very recently, and I read the paper. I don't know any more than anybody else who may have read the Bradenton Herald about the story, but I was fascinated by the comments underneath the actual story, where readers could weigh in and sort of tell you how they feel about it. And there were lots of things like, well, why does she stay? Why didn't she break up with him? And one I found especially fascinating, that I have a quote because I think it speaks to exactly what we're talking about today. This person, and I don't know the gender, male, female, said, they need to teach, especially girls, the warning signs of a person who's too possessive in a relationship, which is exactly what we're talking about. When a person puts blame, guilt, implies wrongdoing, makes a comment on one's appearance in dressing, you have a problem. Sad thing is, she probably saw it and ended up dead. I thought, isn't that interesting? Somebody, you know, is reading this article and making the connection that we have to start working with younger women. I appreciate that comment, but I also know that we've been teaching a high school program for, how old am I?
Long before I started
20 years plus.
Yes.
And we still have domestic violence homicides. So what's the I mean, we're doing what I think all that we have a shelter, we have services, we have counseling, we can do a whole show on nothing but the available resources. They're free, they're confidential. We have law enforcement responding better than they've ever responded. Okay. They give information in English and Spanish thanks to a project we did jointly, Little Pink Books. What's the disconnect? Why are we still having domestic violence homicides? What's going on? I mean, any ideas,
Well, I think there are a number of issues that come to play here. And first and foremost, when we've looked at through our domestic violence fatality review team, what we have found is that those women that actually died or in their intimate partner relationships had not reached out for help. And I think that is the key issue there, that they're not they're not going for those services. They're not making sure that they're getting those injunctions, and I think that's the important piece. And so with our lethality assessment, what we're trying to do is connect those individuals with the Hope Shelter at the point when they're most amenable to getting those services or receiving services from your folks. And I think that if we could get those services more in the field at the time with those individuals in a safe environment, I think that they would be more acceptable, receptive to the services. And I think that's going to be a huge piece in preventing future deaths, is we've got to link these women to the services.
Well, and hopefully we're trying a pilot project, as I know you're well aware of. Our staff are on call. We're rotating a weekly on call so that when deputies respond and the domestic violence detective in your department is actually called, one of the three is called out, they're partnered with different folks. We are on call at that same time to respond with them, right then, right there, to talk about what's going on and do safety planning. And I honestly, as long as I've been doing it, it staggers my mind that 95% of the people who are domestic violence homicide victims never come to a center for help. So the good news is what we do works, yay. The bad news is that's 95% of the homicide victims that maybe we could have prevented had we had a better link. So what do we say? I was telling you earlier, I happened to answer the phone at the office the other day, this week, and a woman called, and I just was the lucky person answering the call. And she said, I'd like to cancel my counseling appointment. Why would you like to cancel? I said, you mind me asking you just a couple questions? Are you safe? Do you have a safety plan? Do you have a website? We have a website. Go to our website. There's a safety plan on there. We'll help you formulate a plan. We're an expert on domestic violence. You're an expert on your partner. Please just do this so you know if he does A, you can do B. If he does C, so on. And so I took a minute to do all that. I said, now can you tell me why you don't want to come in? And she said, I don't want to be labeled as one of those weak women. I don't want to be a victim of domestic violence. And after 27 years of doing this work, I hesitate. I didn't have an answer, and you know me, I have an answer for everything. I did that. I said, what can I say to that?
So they don't want to see themselves as a victim, and but the reality is, they do need assistance, and maybe the terminology, and maybe the way in which the community views those individuals, and maybe culturally. I mean, I'm certain that there are issues culturally where folks just do not want to reach out. They don't want to have that intervention in their lives. They feel that they can deal with this problem. But we have to be the stewards of this information to get it to them. I think we have to find a way, and if that is reaching out to them in an area where they feel comfortable versus them coming to us. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And I think that may make the difference, and we have to continue to look in areas where it is working, where they have made a reduction and they have gotten those services out. How have they done it? What are they doing differently?
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. What I wound up saying to her, because I didn't know what level of understanding about the whole situation. I said, basically you're a victim of crime. I don't think I used those exact words. I said, if you're sitting at a red light, minding your own business, it's just a red light, light goes green, you proceed forward as you've been taught to do, you're following the rules, and I'm drunk as a skunk, I'm absolutely under the influence, blow through the red light and I hit you, you're a victim of a DUI accident. Would you feel bad about that, or would you clearly blame me for being the drunk person, out of control, not playing by the rules? I'm doing the behavior that's considered negative. So I'm the one who's in trouble because I'm the one who blew through the red light and did all this that caused the problem. She absolutely understood that. I said, can you think of your situation in much the same way, that you have a partner who's committed a crime? It's kind of that simple. You were at the red light doing your thing. You may not be the perfect partner. You may not, there's all that, well, I was a nag, I did this, I did that. I said, please, we're human. That's the human condition. And I don't know if I said, just think about, we can reschedule you. I understand your, work is a problem, so on and so forth. We're open in the evening, but will you think about it? And I hoped in some small way I could sort of switch that thinking. But I think that's going to be your hardest job with the schools and the kids, is changing the victim blaming about this crime.
See it. I see it every school, no matter what age. We show videos, and they're snickering during the video, and afterwards, oh, she's so dumb, she's stupid, why does she stay with him? So it's even the students at that age still have that mentality that instead of focusing on why is he hitting her, why is he calling her names, why is he acting like that, they're still victim blaming instead of making me better.
And so what do you say to them when they're, oh, she's so stupid, I can't believe she's staying with that guy?
I say, let's take the focus off her. She's a victim. The victim's never wrong. Why is he doing what he's doing? And in this case, the video happens to be a male perpetrator again. But, and they get that, but I think it's their first initial thought to say, she's stupid. Why is she staying with him? Why don't you just leave?
I won't pick a guy like that.
Right.
I mean, it's a control mechanism.
We hear it with adults.
Right.
We hear the same thing with adults. And, it's probably a lot of the messages that they're hearing from adults, just like they learn all sorts of other things. They learn these messages and these things from maybe their parents or other adults or the media, or, because adults think the same way. And it's...
I think that there's something else that's happening there, and I think it's, as a society, how often do we take the responsibility for what we've done? And
Just
I think that
generally speaking.
Generally speaking,
absolutely.
And you look at it even in situations where you have lawyers representing folks, they're always trying to say, well, this circumstance caused me to behave this way. They're not taking ownership of their own actions and that they're responsible for their actions. And so I think that you'll see, well, what did she do that made him that mad? That's sometimes you'll get someone that'll say, well, or the guy says, she's been cheating on me, so that automatically justifies that type of a behavior. Whether that's a true statement or not, but you do see that a lot, and you see that person going around making that kind of a statement. The abuser will throw that out there as if that should justify everything that they're doing. And I think that we really need to get back in our society to accepting the responsibility for what we do ourselves, and that we can't control other people's reactions or actions to things. Only they can do that.
So are you going to be a counselor in your next career? Major Schinkeldecker, that's exactly what we try to talk about around our organization.
That's what we
Personal
talk about in
responsibility.
You can't, and the only person you can change is you.
And we must say that daily to the adults who come through our doors. Well, can't you get him to stop hitting me? Oh, that I could. I'd be wealthy. I'd be retired by now and not still working. Well, if we can go back to the fatality review team a little bit, because I think it's I would imagine most people don't know what we do. We come together with anybody involved in a death. Sheriff's Department or city law enforcement, state attorney's office. We've had the medical examiner there. Who else have we invited to?
Clerk of the court's office. When we're talking about injunctions.
That's right. Is there a record of a restraining order, an injunction? Anybody? We've invited folks like a pastor of a church. We had one of our early ones we did, there was a family member, but then the family member couldn't make it. And we talk about who knew, what steps may have been taken to alleviate the situation. I know we talked about, had there been previous injunctions, how many law enforcement reports, who went out, what happened. We had one where we clearly saw that it was a language barrier. A woman tragically murdered went to the courts to get an injunction, and not understanding the paperwork, asked her child, a preteen, I believe,
and she was Hispanic, and this was a case where she did have a language barrier, didn't know how to fill the document out, had her daughter who that really wasn't the appropriate person to help her. And there was really no resources at that point for her to assist her in that paperwork and in getting that information to the right people. And so in writing that injunction, of course, her daughter had to write it, so that's obviously a problem. And maybe she didn't say everything that needed to be said. She didn't have anyone to help her make sure that
Zero
she put,
guidance.
Right, put all of the important points in the injunction. It didn't, for whatever reason, it didn't get satisfied. The information was not satisfactory to the judge, and so they did not give her the injunction. They did not grant it. And this person just, I think, felt emboldened by the fact that nothing was happening and was stalking her, and then ended up laying wait for her, and he would go to her place of work. He would drive by her residence. She had had him removed from the home, and he lay waiting for her, and then he shot and killed her in front of her children. And I wanted to kind of bring that whole aspect up, the fact that there are children that witness domestic violence happening, and that is the second most common reason that we remove children in Manatee County. It's,
Can you say that again so that people really, because I know that, but the impact of that is huge. Think of the resources in this county for your child protective investigators. And the second most common reason is domestic violence.
Yeah, it's one of the first two most common reasons we go out on a child abuse neglect complaint. Number one is substance abuse, and number two is domestic violence. And the number one reason we remove children is substance abuse, and I think generally it's in the top three. We have put a program together that has reduced the number of children we've had to remove. Fortunately, we've partnered up with your services so that we can put services in place, and we can strengthen that mothers, generally the mother, in having the perpetrator not be in the home. And if we can keep the perpetrator out of the home and keep her safe, then her children can remain. But if the perpetrator is coming back into the home and her children are not safe, then we may have to remove those children. But we've done a really good job of putting wraparound services in place and monitoring those injunction hearings to know when these children might not be safe also. Because we take the tone that we may not be able to do everything because you're an adult and you may elect not to have these services, but we will protect your children, even at the risk, if we need to remove them.
Making you a little cross.
Yes, if we need to remove them. And I know that doesn't always sit well with people, but we have an obligation, and we have the statutes that require us to take those kinds of actions.
What you really mean is, it drives me crazy.
I know it does, but
we've managed to work it out. Because, I do think we have an obligation as a society to protect children. And I've never said, we've called, as you know, when thank God it's not very often, but we have had women in our shelter that we know were not appropriate parents. And were sneaking off, for lack of a better way to put it, to spend time with the batterer. And if they want to be with the batterer, absolutely. You know what? You're over 21. You're not a disabled adult. Fine, go do what you want to do. But the minute you're putting your children in danger too, and we've talked to you. I mean, we've had an honest discussion because some people don't get it. But okay, now we know you're getting it. You're just choosing to do this. Then we feel we also have an obligation. And we had a woman that. Her husband was equally as violent to the 3 kids. They were stepchildren, and he didn't want the stepchildren. And one of the things, if we can just briefly, something I found fascinating from the fatality review teams, we've been doing these for a few years. So we staff a case, we get together, we look at who knew, who didn't know, and then we look at sort of common elements. We know a weapon in the home is more dangerous, so there's a predictor when somebody's dating, if he's like a gun aficionado, and I don't mean a hunter, there are people who have guns who are perfectly appropriate, but this is a gun owner who's not acting appropriate. It's a clue. One of the things I learned that I didn't know, non-biological children in the home statistically increases the risk to everybody in the family. A batterer who's the step parent is more dangerous than when it's their blood, their biological children. And I found that fascinating.
Well, and also children who witness domestic violence are more likely to see that as appropriate behavior. So your males can end up becoming batterers and your females can end up learning how to be a victim, that would be the appropriate way to be treated. So you go right back to the situation in the school setting. of trying to undo that. So that's another reason we feel it's important to intercede in those instances so we can stop the cycle of domestic violence, because it becomes a learned behavior. And we really think that's important, and to get those children into counseling as quickly as possible. So our law enforcement officers are trained to include them in the reports, to include the schools that they attend. We try to, especially with really young children, if we've made an arrest, we want to connect with the school the next day and let that counselor or teacher know that there's been an arrest in that home. So if that child comes in acting angry, sleeping in class, that they're not treated inappropriately, that they already know what the issues are, and we've gotten really good feedback with that type of a program.
Well, that's good, because you know, kids, they don't get to pick their parents, and somebody said that to me years ago, and I thought, how simple, but how accurate. And oh, that we could make every family a healthy, safe place for them, but some are just not. And most women, at least the women we work with, they certainly care about the best interest of their children. I'll tell you, the two big reasons people come to us, it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but the two main reasons people come to us is either he's cheating on her, and suddenly all bets are off, or the number one reason, I think, at least the last time I checked the stats when I asked what catapulted somebody through the door, the person has started to become violent with the children. And we see most mothers really want to protect their kids. Okay, it's one thing to pick on me, but now Junior, all, you know, and Bree does intakes in the office when the advocates are busy. She helps with the overflow when she's not in the school system, and that's one of the big...
Exactly what you said. You know, I can take it myself, but the minute you put your hands on my child or threaten to hurt my child,
I'm finished. So, you know, I think our partnership really does work wonders. And we've learned quite a bit. We have a farm worker outreach program where our Latino women advocates actually go to the farm working community and try to engage Hispanic women who are really, our theory is, I can't prove this, but I would bet they're afraid because they're afraid of being deported. If you're a farm worker and you're undocumented, reaching out for help is a huge risk, and we just want to make sure you're safe. Regardless of how somebody feels about immigration issues, you know, that's not our topic today. There are people in our community getting hurt, and their kids are in school, and their kids may grow up and be dating your kids. So when you think about it that way, you probably want us to help intervene and see if we can reduce some of the instances of violence.
Well, I can tell you that that's not even a question that we ask an alleged victim. We do not ask them if they are a United States citizen or not, but we are interested if perpetrators are not United States citizens, because they can be deported for committing crimes, but you don't get deported because you're a victim.
Yay! I think that's a really important thing for anybody that's watching, you know, for folks to know that you're not concerned about deportation for the victim.
Absolutely.
But if you commit
not.
a crime, that changes the playing field a little bit. Well, I just noticed we're starting to get really close to running out of time here. So I'd like to invite you to offer any final comments, thoughts. What is it you'd like people to know? Bree?
I'm in a very unique position to be able to work with the young people in our community, and I get to see a different side of them. They're very dynamic, they're very, very open, but they're also like sponges. So for adults that may be watching this program, just to be aware of the messages that we're sending to our children. And the children that I work with, the students, are so open to receiving the positive messages that I've been privileged to be able to give to them. And I think that they really are learning. I mean, we have, you know, 93% of the students that have gone through my program have said that they can recognize warning signs in a relationship, you know, of abuse.
That's
and
great.
91% have said that they know what a healthy relationship looks like. So, I mean, with those kind of statistics, I think that it's very promising that we may put ourselves out of business someday.
From your lips, as they say. Let's hope. Well, thank you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Major Shingledecker, what would you like the community to take away from this?
I think the most important thing is reporting. If we're going to, you know, make headway with this, we need to know that the problem exists. We know that the victims themselves report not very often, and that it's usually going to be a neighbor or someone that's witnessing it as they drive down the street and see someone battering and get a tag number and call it in. And with the cell phone situation as it is now, it's very helpful. We've got to report this information, and you just don't know how many lives you'll save with reporting that information, because it's going to give us an opportunity as law enforcement to go out and investigate the circumstances. And if there is an assessment that we do at that point, and if there is lethality, then we can make that connection of that victim to the Hope Services. And again, you just won't know the lives that you'll save in doing that.
Well, and if we save one, isn't it all worthwhile?
Absolutely.
Thank you for all your work over the years and for partnering with us and being such a great advocate. I mean, because you really are. You've done amazing work, and I just, not that you're going anywhere, but I do really appreciate that our partnership and how hard you've worked with us hand in glove to help us make a difference in our community, because it is our community. We all live here, and we want a better quality of life. So thank you again for being here today. Thank you for joining us for this special summer update on domestic violence in our community. Please send positive messages to your young people, as Bree requests, and report domestic violence if you know it's happening. Encourage people to get help. If nothing else, there is a website for Hope Family Services. It'll be on the screen. There's a safety plan area on there in English and in Spanish. So please encourage somebody, even at the privacy of their own home. Be careful the batter doesn't find it, but they can sit and learn this information through our website at absolutely no risk, and they don't have to be embarrassed. And again, you just may save a life. Thank you again for watching, and because of you, there's hope.
He isolated me away from my family and my friends, and I always thought of how can I change and become better to where, he wouldn't hit me anymore.
I was never good enough. I was too fat, I was too ugly. I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't pretty. I'd go in the bathroom and put on a little bit of makeup for him, and it was, who are you going to screw today?
He was actually putting me on dating websites, essentially trying to drug me and sell me out to other men.
He raped me, he touched me, he choked me, he bumped my head on the coffee table. I was bleeding.
When you lock your door at night, you protect yourself from the people on the outside. Well, when I locked my door, I trapped myself in my house with the one that was going to do the harm.
He hit my son with an extension cord. Not my child, not my children. You can hit me all day, but you won't hit my kids, you won't hit my children.
I just want to give up because I am tired. I am really tired of making the family work. I was desperate, I was frustrated, and the most devastating part is being hopeless. The first thing they do is to give you the safety and the security. Safe is their priority.
They offered me housing, a safety plan, and mostly provided the emotional counseling that I need to help me move from that victim mentality to one of strength, confidence, empowerment.
It's encouragement enough to just want to keep on and to keep pressing on, and that everything will be okay, everything will be all right.
Just having somebody to call and say, I'm having a bad day, I need I need to talk to somebody. I could call and come in anytime and they would talk to me. I was able to go back to school because I felt like I was smart enough to do it. I knew that I could do it now.
Even though they were strangers, they had become my family. They had become friends.
Nobody extended a helping hand, but you were there. You have treated me with respect and dignity, in which I really, really certainly appreciate that. You did not let me down.
It was more than a job for them, that they were saving lives. And they saved mine.